stunk last week. There's a mic up here. It's L.
Do I need this?
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Ooh, a little hot. So, if you weren't here last week, we have started kind of a discussion, it works like we talked last week, right along with Project 51, where we're talking about Jacob through Chad Bird's book, Limping with God, and it really does work well with going through the Project 51 readings, because we're kind of right in the middle of it. We've made it through Jacob, most of Jacob now. So last week, just a quick highlight of last week. Well, I guess let's pray real quick before we start. God, we come to you. We thank you for just this opportunity to get together and to talk about your word, and to talk about the people that you use to bring about your will, God, and what that means for us. We thank you for your son, who is the ultimate part of this story that we have. God, we're so thankful for his sacrifice and what he means for us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So last week we talked about Jacob. Just a few highlights in case you missed or you don't know much about Jacob himself. Jacob, by all accounts, was a shady character, and we talked about all the things that he had done so far, which is, really quick in his life. He proves to be a pretty despicable guy. We talked about how biblical stars seem to be messed up or more messed up than we are. And we talked about how God uses those people without cleansing them first. We talked about how Jacob is a model disciple because he displays God's power in using imperfect people. We talked about Genesis 25:21, how just like his father, Isaac's father Abraham, Isaac had to wait to have kids. He had to wait on God's timing. And we talked about how God's timing is always late, or he's habitually late, not always late, but he's habitually late. And then we talked about how God makes us wait because he's almost searching for that "how long, O Lord," right, that we see so many times in Psalms. And just because, or just so, he gets to eventually say, now it's my time. And I think that's awesome. That's part of why I love this story, is just kind of that rough start that we had in Jacob's life and what that means for us. So we're going to, just real quick, in case it's been a little bit since we've read, I'm going to read some of Jacob and Esau's life through some of Genesis 25, if you want to follow along. Just kind of get us kick-started for tonight. I'm going to skip 26 because it kind of feels like deja vu with Abraham. So we'll just do 25 and then read some of 27. We will start actually with verse 25, 21. So Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. The babies jostled each other within her, and she said, "Why is this happening to me?" So she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples from within you will be separated. One will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." When the time came for her to give birth, there were two twin boys in her womb. The first come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment, so they named him Esau. After this, his brother came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel, so he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah gave birth to them. The boys grew up, and Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was content to stay home among the tents. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country famished. He said to Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished." This is why it was also called Edom. Jacob replied, "First, sell me your birthright." "Look, I'm about to die," Esau said. "What good is a birthright to me?" But Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. He ate and drank and then got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright. Then chapter 26 is a story of Isaac and Abimelech. It's very similar to the story of Abraham, where Isaac and Rebekah decide to pretend like he's their brother and sister, and they get caught. What's interesting about the story is it interprets in the Hebrew, Isaac gets caught Isaacing his wife, because if you remember, Isaac translates laughing, so it's kind of a fun translation. But we move forward to the second set of nefarious things that Jacob's going to do in 27, and we'll read kind of the first half of 27 here. When Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see, he called Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son." "Here I am," he answered. Isaac said, "I am now an old man and don't know the day of my death. Now then, get your equipment, your quiver and bow, and go out to the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare me the kind of tasty food I like and bring it to me to eat, so that I may give you my blessing before I die." Now Rebekah was listening, and as Isaac spoke to his son Esau. When Esau left the open country to hunt game and bring it back, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "Look, I overheard your father say to your brother Esau, 'Bring me some game and prepare me some tasty food to eat, so that I may give you my blessing in the presence of the Lord before I die. Now, my son, listen carefully to what I tell you. Go out to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats, so I can prepare some tasty food for your father, just the way he likes it. Then take it to your father to eat, so that he may give you his blessing before he dies.' Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, 'But my brother Esau is a hairy man, while I have smooth skin. What if my father touches me? I would appear to be tricking him and would bring down a curse on myself rather than a blessing.' His mother said to him, 'My son, let the curse fall on me. Just do what I say and get them for me.' So he went and got them and brought them to his mother, and she prepared some tasty food just the way his father liked it. Then Rebekah took the best clothes of Esau, her older son, which she had in the house, and put them on her younger son Jacob. She also covered his hands and the smooth part of his neck with goat skins. She then handed to her son Jacob the tasty food and bread she had made. He went to his father and said, 'My father.' 'Yes, my son,' he answered. 'Who is it?' Jacob said to his father, 'I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Please sit up and eat of my game so that you may give me your blessing.' Isaac asked his son, 'How did you find it so quickly, my son?' 'The Lord your God gave me success,' he replied. Then Isaac said to Jacob, 'Come near so I can touch you, my son, to know whether or not you are really my son Esau or not.' Jacob went close to his father Isaac, who touched him and said, 'The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau.' He did not recognize him, for his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau, so he proceeded to bless him. 'Are you really my son Esau?' he asked. 'I am,' he replied. Then he said, 'My son, bring me some of your game to eat so that I may give you my blessing.' Jacob brought it to him, and he ate. And he brought him some wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, 'Come here, my son, and kiss me.' So he went to him and kissed him. When Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, he blessed him and said, 'Ah, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you heaven's dew and the earth's riches, an abundance of grain, new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed.' After Isaac finished blessing him, and Jacob had scarcely left his father's presence, his brother Esau came in from hunting. He too prepared some tasty food and brought it to his father. Then he said to him, 'My father, please sit up and eat some of my game, so that you may give me your blessing.' His father Isaac asked him, 'Who are you?' 'I am your son,' he answered, 'your firstborn Esau.' Isaac trembled violently and said, 'Who is it that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it just before you came, and I blessed him, and indeed he will be blessed.' When Esau heard his father's words, he burst out with a loud, bitter cry and said to his father, 'Bless me too, father.' He said, "Your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing." Esau said, "Isn't he rightly named Jacob? This is the second time he has taken advantage of me. He took my birthright, and now he's taken my blessing." Then he asked, "Haven't you reserved any blessing for me?" Isaac answered Esau, "I have made him lord over you and all of his relatives, all his servants, and I have sustained him with grain and new wine. So what can I possibly do for you, my son?" Esau said to his father, "Do you have only one blessing? My father, bless me too." Then Esau wept aloud. His father Isaac answered him, "Your dwelling will be away from the earth's riches, away from the dew of the heaven above. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck." Esau held a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing his father had given him. He said to himself, "The days of mourning for my father are near. Then I will kill my brother Jacob." When Rebekah was told that her older son Esau had said, she sent for her younger son Jacob and said to him, "Your brother Esau is planning to avenge himself by killing you. Now then, my son, do what I say. Flee at once to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay with him for a while until your brother's fury subsides. When your brother is no longer angry with you and forgets what you did to him, I'll send word for you back from there. Why should I lose both of you in one day?" Oh, that was a lot. Okay. So now we're caught up. So just to go, I mean, there's a lot in that story. There's a whole bunch to unpack here, which is all the fun. But if we go back to Rebekah, to the start of the story, Rebekah is very clearly in a lot of pain based on the words that are written here, that they're like, it's like they're fighting, the way it translates, in the womb, which is an interesting start for a couple brothers who spend a whole lot of time fighting. The way it's described, it doesn't remind me of when Rachel was pregnant. My wife Rachel was pregnant with Link. I don't remember her being this, in as much pain. But I could be wrong. But so Rebekah is unaware of her situation because there's no ultrasounds, right, back then. So she asked God, "Why? Why is this? Why am I feeling this? Why is it? There's so much going on in here." And God says, "Guess what? There's two. That's big. That's crazy." And he also says in that revelation, he says, "The older shall serve the younger." But it's interesting, in the Hebrew, it could be translated, "The older, the younger shall serve." But we actually get to find out later. We have the pleasure of knowing that it's translated the first way, right? The older shall serve the younger, because of how the story works out. So there's two important things to note here about Rebekah's pregnancy. Number one is the big things of God begin in little places, in such little places that we are foolhardy to believe that anything will ever come of them. And number two, when God begins with something big, he starts small. Does anybody have any good examples of when God started small for a big plan? Yeah, we got a microphone. Abraham. You don't have to walk back for that one. That's a good one. Absolutely. There's another big one. We celebrate his birthday every year. Jesus. Yeah. Absolutely. That's a big one. He started pretty small with that one. So we can see through things like Abraham, through things like Jacob and Esau, through Jesus, that what God says, not what we see, and how we live and move, that what God says, not what we see. That's how we live and have our hope, right? And what's really cool about this story is God's choosing is not based on our moral, intellect, or spiritual credentials. Like if we go to Romans 9, 6 through 13, Paul even talks about this exact situation, Jacob and Esau. So if you want to go there, I can read it real quick. 9, 6 through 13, Romans. It is not as though God's word has failed. For not all who are descended from Israel are Israel, nor because they are his descendants are they all Abraham's children. On the contrary, it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. In other words, it is not the children by physical descendant who are God's children, but it is the children of the promise who are regarded as Abraham's offspring. For this is how the promise was stated. At the appointed time I will turn, and Sarah will have a son. Not only that, but Rebekah's children were conceived at the same time by our father Isaac. Yet before the twins were born or had done anything good or bad, in order that God's purpose and election might stand, not by works, but by him who calls, she was told, the older will serve the younger. Just as written, Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. That one, so Paul's talking about it right there, right? That God didn't wait until Jacob or Esau proved that they were capable of being used. He didn't care. So how is that, my question for you all, how is that fundamentally different than how we operate now and how the world operates?
Perhaps we make plans and ask God to bless them, and in these instances it seemed like God is making the plans. I can get louder.
Yeah.
It's green. It's green, and it's louder and louder. Now, my first observation would be that nowadays people, Christians, we fall into a trap of making plans and then asking God to bless what we intend to do instead of waiting to see what God has intended and then following that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Of mice and men, best laid plans, yeah. We are very good at it, and what's relieving about realizing is that realizing the story of Jacob and Esau and other plans is that God's will is done despite all the screw ups, right? He works with it. He takes it and he uses it. He's not interested in finding the perfect person to do exactly as he expected. He's interested in using what he has. He's a craftsman.
You also see that in who Jesus chose as his disciples.
Yeah. It's like you're stealing my notes up here.
Oh, no, don't worry about it.
She said, it's,
Steven is my dog. I'm sorry.
she said it's also like we see that when Jesus chooses his disciples and who Jesus chooses as his disciples. So yeah, John 15:16. Real quick. John 15:16. You did not choose, he's talking to his disciples, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit that will last, and so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give to you. So, as we walk through life, we might have the same thoughts that the disciples had, right? The same thoughts that a lot of biblical characters had. You might say, yes, Lord, but I have a felony on my record. Yes, Lord, but I have a ruined marriage. Yes, Lord, but I'm full of hatred. I've screwed up everything in my life. I've betrayed those closest to me. I'm filthy with shame on the inside. I'm certainly not worthy that God should give me a second's worth of thought. And to all of those, and as evidenced here in these stories, is God says, I forgive you. I love you. My heart is yours, and there is no condemnation for those that are in Christ Jesus. But there's a whole eternity worth of peace, love, and hope. Remember, Jacob's good or bad deeds had zero to do with God's choice for him in his future plan. like we said, the Lord's accustomed to working with sinners. That's really the only material he has. So eventually, as we progress through the story that we read, those twins make their way out, and we find that biblical names are just as terrible as Gen Z names. Esau is a baby ginger bear. Jacob is a heel tripper. And in the Hebrew here, the heel is in a dominant sense, but it's really not in a good way. It kind of carries the connotation of grabbing someone's heel to trip them or pull them back or hinder them. Are there any other names that carry significance? Who here has a name? Who here knows their name's significance?
Rachel. Ooh, Rachel is Little Lamb.
Little lamb. Yeah. Bum, 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 bum.
My name is Nathaniel, and it means gift from God.
Gift from God. Yeah. Okay. Cool. It's way cooler when it means gift from God than hairy bear. You know, hairy red bear. I'm glad. I don't know if mine has any meaning besides carrying things. And I'm not sure. But it is interesting that it seems like if we saw Isaac's name was laughter, right? And it comes from Sarah laughing when she found out, because she was so old that she was having a baby. That we had a different way of choosing names then. So the imagery of Jacob grabbing at Esau's heel, it may not have been intentional on Jacob's part when he was coming out, but it does start Jacob's path towards ambition. And Jacob proves to be a pretty ambitious guy, in the sense that ambition is a drug. I don't know if you've ever thought about it like this. So Jacob, or Chad Bird, says in his book, I'll just read from him real quick. It's really good. He talks about ambition. He said, "Ambition. There was a significant portion of my life from around the age of 16 to 35 when one of the highest compliments I could receive was being labeled ambitious. I would wear that adjective like a badge of honor. You bet I'm ambitious, I would say to myself as I surveyed the future landscape of my carefully orchestrated plans to rise up the ranks, achieve my dreams, and outdo all my brothers in the faith. I didn't smoke, I drank on occasion, but I became heavily addicted to an age-old drug, the opiate of ambition. And I snorted, smoked, and shot up that narcissistic narcotic day and night. What I wouldn't give to get ahead. What I wouldn't sacrifice to climb the ladder rungs of success. I was a man on a mission, and the ambitious mission was self-absorbed, self-advancement to self-glorification." Sounds pretty similar to Jacob's life, yeah? And we can see from this that ambition that we're talking about in this context is not a drive to do one's best to help others. It's the drive to do whatever it takes for me. You know, ambition can harness some good qualities in humanity, right? We think of virtues like hard work, commitment, drive, but it perverts all of them into services of self. Ambition, in most sense, is not a hand out to help. It's the grabbing of a heel of another person to pull them back so that you can get ahead. Because getting ahead is all that matters. Up until modern times, ambition was considered a vice and not a virtue. How has that changed? How has that changed to now? And how do you feel like that's changed the world that we live in?
Well, I really hadn't thought about the vice part of ambition, but now that I do think about it, I can see that a lot of times when you see ambition playing out in like hurting others, stepping on others, and throwing them under the bus and those kinds of things. And so from that respect, I guess that's what I think of ambition right now, for the most part,
Yeah.
in the world. But if you're ambitious for God, then you know the first commandment, love. What Jesus said is love God and love others.
Yeah.
So if you're ambitious for the kingdom, those kinds of things don't play out.
Right. Yeah. It's where your focus is. Yeah. Yeah. You can certainly be ambitious about the right things, but it very often leads to self-service because it's hard to be focused on getting ahead without bringing someone else down in your path, and that's dangerous. Paul actually talks about ambition in 1 Thessalonians 4, 9 through 12. We're kind of all over the place tonight, but he says this in regards to ambition. Now in 1 Thessalonians 4, 9 through 12, now about your love for one another, we do not need to write to you, for you yourselves have been taught by God to love each other. And in fact, you do all love God's family through Macedonia. Yet we urge you, brothers and sisters, to do so more and more. And here it is. And make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. You should mind your own business and work with your hands, just as we told you, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, so that you will not be dependent on anybody. Paul's saying, be ambitious about leading a quiet life, because it's not, you can't step on people that way. It's easier to love one another that way. But it's similar to the way sin works, right? Ambition itself. I'm actually going to read Chad Bird again. He says, we may hate a particular evil or vice. It may once have destroyed our lives. We may know its inner workings, its seductive traps, its deadly fruits, but that does not mean it goes away. I have known alcoholics, for instance, who have stayed on the wagon for decades, only to fall off one day and shatter their lives once again. Did they not know that would happen? Of course they knew, but it was such a blinding power of evil. So, ambition, like any other sin, ambition, like anything else, can be used in a sinful manner, right? But it's amazing to think that like God, through all of it, he died on the. It's amazing to think that on the cross, dying for evil ambition and sins of humanity, the humble Lord lifted up his heel and brought it down on the head of the serpent. In a splendid irony, the Father brought down his heel, a Jacob for us, right, whom we can hold fast to and emerge from death again into life. That's an awesome image, right? God gives us this Jacob to squash that's there. Doesn't mean that we're not going to have it anymore, but it's been squashed, and I love that. And so we've made it through kind of the first little bit of their lives of Jacob and Esau, and we see the first real example of Jacob's ambition taking advantage of Esau. Does anyone know what that is? What are we talking about what's the first time Jacob takes advantage of him? Takes his birthright. Yeah. C.S. Lewis writes that charity and uncharity begin at home. And he alludes to that in a sermon when he's talking about a pastor who mentions that the home is a place of peace to escape the troubles of the world. And the whole congregation tuned out when he started talking about that, right? Because they all knew it was a lie, Are you kidding me? Have you been at some houses? It's not always an escape. Sometimes it is. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes it can be. You know, Lewis writes, he says, stop telling lies about the home life. Sure, my domestic life is a castle of solitude. But just as often, it's a dungeon of resentment, passive-aggressive poison, and favoritism. And we see here, in this story, favoritism runs in the family, right? Esau was Isaac's favorite, Jacob was Rebekah's, and that leads to some pretty dramatic family trauma. Jacob's favoritism of Joseph will also lead later, we'll find out later, to a shattering of the family. This is a pretty vivid example how the sins of a father and mother are passed down from generation to generation. There's a whole family systems theory model on it in today. So the next scene in our passages after discussing the favorites is probably what Jacob is most known for, what we just said, the taking of the birthright. And he, like we said, he takes advantage of his brother. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the game Settlers of Catan. Some of you may have, but it's a resource trading game. You get resources based on a roll of a dice. And at being the good older brother that I am, I know how to take advantage of my younger siblings when I play. And my little brother is a desperate guy. He's desperate to do whatever it takes to get ahead, or whatever he thinks it takes to get ahead. And I can see it in his eyes. He comes to the bargaining table with it on it all over his face. I'm willing to give up everything to get this one item. And so I pretty consistently take advantage of it. And one time I took all of his cards and I gave him one card, all 5 of his cards, and gave him one card back. And he looked at it and he looked at me and he said, I made a terrible deal, didn't I? I said, you sure did. But, and so he spent the whole game upset with me. But, so I can relate in this situation to being able to take advantage of siblings. It's probably my favorite part about being an older sibling. Some of you may know. Some of you are younger siblings out there who spent their whole lives getting abused in games. But if we're being honest, like my younger brother Esau, it was a bit of a drama queen in this story, right? He shows up and somehow one bowl of soup is all he needs to restore himself back to life. It almost sounds like a video game where, you just need one thing to restore your health completely. It's kind of an odd situation. But the truth is, the scene makes Jacob feel really gross. Almost as gross as somebody who takes advantage and price gouges people during a hurricane. It's kind of what it reminds me of. But if we look at that story as I just talked about taking advantage of my family, there's a really high likelihood that the person that has hurt you or will hurt you is a member of your family. Robert Capon, one of my favorite authors, writes that therapist couches aren't filled with people who've been hurt by total strangers. Just sit with that for a moment. We're generally not hurt by people that we don't know. This wronging or being wronged brings up a really tough topic to tackle. It's forgiveness. Sometimes forgiveness is easy and sometimes it's hard. Chad Bird writes a little bit about forgiveness. Here he says, it's not surprising that forgiveness is hard. It is in fact entirely predictable, because to forgive people means that we must die. There is no other way, and that is also, of course, why we don't want to forgive. To forgive is to die, and to die to people who we would become, and often do become when we breed bitterness, conceive resentment, and nurse the desire for a pound or 3 of flesh from those who have hurt us. It consumes us. It eats at us like a cancer from within. To forgive is to kill the ungod within us, for whom absolution and redemption is reprehensible. Forgiveness is, if we think to the Lord's Prayer, what's the one action that's required of us in that prayer? Yeah. The rest of them are not on our hands. The rest of that prayer is not focused on us. So one part of it. So in saying that, my point is there's arguably no more fundamentally Christian act than forgiving others. So there's a really good book that I read. It's a top 100 people in history. Some of you may have read this. So it's about 20 years ago, author put together the top 100 most influential people in history. Does anybody got any guesses where Jesus fell? If you know, don't spoil it. Number one. I wouldn't be asking if he was number one. Probably not number one. Yeah, right. Yeah, no, he's not number one. So any guesses who would be above him? Throughout all of history. Dr. Spock. Love it. Muhammad and Sir Isaac Newton. And this was kind of a gut punch. The reason that the author put him at third, put him at 3. He said, does this mean that Jesus had no original ethical ideas? Not at all. A highly distinctive viewpoint is presented in Matthew 5:43 through 44. Ye have heard that it hath been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies. Bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. And a few lines earlier, resist not evil, but whoever shall smite thee on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. Now these ideas, which are not a part of Judaism of Jesus' day, nor most of other religions, are surely among the most remarkable and original ethical ideas ever presented. If they were widely followed, I would have no hesitation in placing Jesus first in this book. But the truth is that they are not widely followed. In fact, they're not even generally accepted. Most Christians consider the injunction to love your enemy as at most an ideal which might be realized in some perfect world, but in one which is not a reasonable guide to conduct in the actual world we live in. We do not normally practice it, do not expect others to practice it, and do not teach our children to practice it. Jesus' most distinctive teaching, therefore, remains an intriguing but basically untried suggestion. That one hurts. But it's true. It's true. And a big piece of that is forgiveness. A big piece of that. But what we have to remember about forgiveness is not the admission of innocence. We don't forgive the innocent. We forgive the guilty. It is the implicit acknowledgement that the absolved did something in need of forgiving. Had Esau forgiven Jacob, he would not be excusing Jacob's evil. Instead, he would be pointing it out and saying, that evil you did, I forgive you. Or rather, God forgives you through me. And I don't hold it against you because God doesn't hold it against you. We forgive because we have been forgiven. Forgiveness begins at home, at charity and uncharity, Lewis said. So why is it so painful to forgive? Does anyone have an answer for that? Yeah, we like to see people pay. Yeah, we do. To get what they deserve, right? We're happy to. What's that?
We think we know what fair is.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. We're all excited about what's fair until we're on the other end of it, right? Until God points out. I mean, there's a really good parable about it, right? The parable of the unmerciful servant. It's a pretty big one. We way too often find ourselves in that situation where we've been forgiven of something big and find reasons to not forgive those around us. So forgiveness is huge in this story. It would be a completely different story had they had the power to forgive. Had Esau had the power to forgive his brother within him. But that's not what happened. And that's part of it. And guess what? God used it. He still did. So we move on to Isaac discussing how old he is. Sometimes when, I wonder myself about what my dad was thinking or worrying about at my age. Is it the same things that I worry about now about, what my little boy's going to do when he grows up? What is he? I want to make sure I'm not emotionally and mentally scarring him with the things that I do and teach him. I want to make sure I'm leading him in the right direction. Was my dad worried about the same things himself? But what's cool about Isaac is there's quite a bit of humor. For a guy named Laughter, there's quite a bit of humor in his life, right? He doesn't notice that he's the most likely target for sacrifice when he's walking up the mountain with his dad. It's pretty clueless to that. He gets caught, like we said before, he gets caught Isaacing his wife, which is kind of interesting. But by all the other accounts, he's got a pretty boring life for a patriarch, for a father of the Jews, one of the fathers. But Isaac himself reminds me of the blind men and elephant story. How many people have heard this story? Where the blind men approach the elephant. And so, just quick synopsis. There's a parable of sorts where they talk about these blind men all approaching an elephant, and they all come to the elephant from different angles. Right? One of them comes to the trunk and says, "Oh, the elephant is like a snake." And then one comes to the side of the elephant and says, "Oh, the elephant is like a wall." And comes to the leg of the elephant and says, "Oh, the elephant's like a tree." And so all those people, all those blind men are right in a sense, but they're wrong because they can't see the whole picture. Guess what? Isaac can't see the whole picture, and that's okay. God's still used to that. So, but we do that. We do that not only with our walk with Jesus. We do that with life, right? We step into a period of our life and we say, "This is what life is about." When I was in my high school years, I thought life was about having like the best sound system in my car, in my $600 Jeep Cherokee. When I got to college, I thought life is about getting this degree and getting a job and becoming successful and thinking I was going to make way more money out of college than I actually did. And life outside of college is thinking, "Oh man, life is all about making money," at $27,000 a year, just not racking it in like I thought. So, but what I was a prisoner of the moment. My wife loves it when I call her a prisoner of the moment. Is we think that what we're experiencing right now is all we will ever experience, and only to find out, like the blind men in the story, that we were wrong all along. So, kind of running out of time here, but I guess let's kind of wrap up, and we'll talk more about the rest of the story, because we're really getting into the meat of Jacob and Esau's debacle, and it's going to be a lot of fun to learn how they treat each other and how they and what that means for us, how God uses that. I don't want to spoil too much of it, but I know we haven't all read it about 1,000 times, but it's I think this is a good place to stop and see if we'll try to pick up next when I'm back in 2 weeks on the rest of the story. But I know this is kind of a weird stopping point, but last week I didn't have enough, and this week I got too much. But my hope for this entire story, or for this entire series, is that we realize that, and hopefully we'll get there, that God is in control, and that He doesn't expect us to be perfect. He doesn't expect us to polish ourselves before we come here, before we step into worship with Him, before we step into a relationship with other Christians, before we start asking Him for help. He doesn't expect us to come polished and prepared. And there's a lot of people upset over Super Bowl ad commercials, a lot of Christians arguing with each other about washing feet and who washed whose feet and what it matters. What's cool is God can use it, and I think we need to remember that. I'm excited for what this year means for all that we have going on. I know that we're going through a lot as a church, and but I'm just interested to see how God can use it, because He's faithful, and I want us to remember that as we navigate this time. It's so hard to put words to it, but like I said, the story of Jacob reminds me a lot of what we're going through. So let's pray real quick, and then we'll be dismissed. God, we come to you. We thank you for all you've done for us. We thank you for your Son and for his sacrifice. We thank you for Jacob and for his example of not being perfect and you using that. We thank you for being willing to work with imperfect people in this world. And we love you so much for all that you've done. It's in your Son's name I pray. Amen.